My Catholic Faith, Lesson 13, Creation. God is almighty. He can make anything from nothing by a mere act of his divine will. It was thus that he created the heavens and earth and everything that is in them. Man can make many wonderful things, but he must make them out of something. He must use the things God created. Before he can make a stone house, he must have stone, cement, brick, etc. But God needs nothing to make anything. Only God could create the very first thing or matter in the universe. What do we mean when we say that God is the creator of heaven and earth? When we say that God is the creator of heaven and earth, we mean that he made all things from nothing by his almighty power. All things were made through him, and without him was made nothing. For in him were created all things, in the heavens and on earth, things visible and things invisible. In the beginning God alone lived. Then out of nothing, by his almighty power, he created heaven and earth, and all things in heaven and on earth. Only God can create. That is, he alone can make something out of nothing. Time began with this creation. Before it there was only eternity. Before the mountains were begotten and the earth and the world were brought forth, from everlasting to everlasting you are God. God created heaven and earth, and everything in heaven and earth. By this is meant everything which is not God. Heaven refers to the angels and their abode, and earth to all the material universe, including the earth, stars, planets, and all things and beings in them. God created everything by an act of his will. He spoke, and it was made. He commanded, and it stood forth. What does the Bible tell us about the creation of the world? The story of the creation of the world is contained in the first chapter and the first 3 verses of the second chapter of the book of Genesis. This story was written by a Hebrew author who wished to tell his readers in the simplest way possible that God made everything. Since he was teaching an important truth in story form, he had to give it movement and a certain logical order. Therefore, he chose the framework of a 7-day week with 6 days of work and 1 of rest. This was the way in which the Israelites led their lives, and they could best understand the work of creation when told in this form. Also, it shows that God's work is an orderly work. Creation was not the result of chaotic confusion. Since this 7-fold division of God's activity is an artificial division, it follows that the assignment of the various works to the various days must also be artificial. What the author wanted to emphasize was that everything came ultimately from God. Some of the important truths that are contained in this story of creation are the following. We can notice, as part of this logical or artificial division, that the first 3 days are devoted to the various parts of the universe, and the last 3 days to the beings that inhabit those parts. The one God and absolute Lord has created all things and is utterly distinct from them. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. God's will is all-powerful. He has only to speak, and the elements of the universe appear and are organized. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Man is the supreme good and goal of creation. He bears God's image and thereby surpasses all the other works of creation. God created man in his image. In the image of God he created him. Because of this superiority of man, he is to have dominion over all the animals. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the cattle, over all the wild animals, and every creature that crawls on the earth. The rhythm of man's earthly life is to be that of the 7-day week, with its 1 day of rest. By describing God as resting on the 7th day, the author teaches that the Lord has sanctified the Sabbath. The Lord has made holy the work of man and all his leisure. God blessed the 7th day and made it holy because on it he rested from all his work of creation. It can also be added that the author's attention to all the details of creation throughout the account teaches us that God is interested in all the details of our daily existence. Is there no contradiction between the account in the book of Genesis and the latest discoveries of science concerning the origin of matter? No, there is not the least contradiction between the account in the book of Genesis and the latest discoveries of science concerning the origin of matter. An apparent contradiction arises through the mistake of uninformed persons who forget that the Church reads the Bible bearing in mind the principal object of the sacred writers. In writing the account of the creation, the sacred writer, under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, wished to impress upon the Jews, for whom he was writing, that there is but one God, and that he created the entire universe, living and lifeless. At that time the Jews were surrounded by adulterous peoples who believed in the existence of many gods, and worshipped all kinds of creatures, even the sun, moon, plants, animals, and images. In pursuing his aim, the sacred writer used the form that was most effective, under the circumstances, to convey his meaning. It is a popular form, that is, it relates historical events in popular expression and order. The words used, while in themselves not scientific terms, are in conformity with ordinary speech and understandable by ordinary people. In the same way today we say, the sun rises in the east, even when we know through the investigations of science that the sun does not rise at all. Events are set down in an order not necessarily scientific, but suited to the understanding of a primitive people and therefore of all mankind. We must remember that the sacred writer was not aiming to teach physics or anthropology, but faith.